Today's episode of the Talk Nats podcast is brought to you by our friends at MANSCAPED. Take 20% off plus free shipping when you use the promo code NATS20 at manscaped.com. That's the promo code NATS20 at manscaped.com. The Nationals haven't played that well this season. Listen, there's been highs, there's been lows, but ultimately, when is it time for Dylan Cruz on the Nationals? I'll discuss next on this edition of the Talk Nats podcast. Hello and welcome in to this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holman. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Talk Nats. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe or follow the Talk Nats podcast on your podcatcher of choice. I sure would appreciate it. So in this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, we talk about when is it time for Dylan Cruz on the big team. Listen, he has been killing it for Rochester. Why wait? What are we waiting for? I'll talk about that. And a little bit later, I'll talk about it isn't just Dylan Cruz. When is it time for Brady House and a lot of the other younger prospects that we've been talking about? And then in the final segment, I'll talk about that all things considered, this Nationals bullpen, even after the trade deadline, has held up pretty well. But just to get it going here, this podcast today, I'm actually coming to you from the Locked On Capitals studio, so you'll have to forgive if you're watching the video of this show, as I just got done recording an episode of Locked On Capitals, but talking about the Nationals and haven't played that well as of late. All things considered, as I had all my notes written out for this show, well, the Nationals went ahead and won, 6-1 against the Rockies. You take a look at it, Rockies aren't the best team in Major League Baseball, but hey, a win is a win. But what I'm really want to talk about in this particular episode is patience. Patience has been the thing that has told all of us Nationals fans this season that this team is not going to be that great this season. This is going to be a season of assessment, but they're going to be better in years to come. You just need to be patient. That's fine. That's all fine and good if, in fact, this team is better next season. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and say that I expect them to win a World Series next year, but that sure would be a good thing. And you take a look at the Nationals, they were sellers. We saw Winker, we saw Harvey, some big name players, Lane Thomas sent out in hopes of getting good returns. And all things considered, I think the Nationals did get some pretty good returns. You take a look at Lane Thomas, hasn't exactly killed it for the Guardians since he has left. So there is a good upside to all this movement. And then, you take a look as well as Victor Robles, a guy that struggled to find his way with the Nationals, playing pretty well for the Mariners. Is that sustainable? That is the question. Ultimately, I am not drinking the Victor Robles Kool-Aid. I've been to this movie before. I've seen it. I know that at points he can be really good, and I know at other points he can be really bad. What Victor Robles are the Mariners going to get? Ultimately, that's their problem. I'm not too concerned about it. Talking about the task at hand, the Nationals. This year's Nationals team, what are we waiting for? We have seen James Wood on this team. Excitement surrounds that, as there was a lot of anticipation this season is when is it going to be the time for James Wood? Well, we saw that, and I have been impressed with what I've seen. Again, and if you are a person that listens to the Talk Nats podcast or the Believe in Nationals podcast, you know that I have spoke of ad nauseum that I think that he has played very well, at points, especially with his bat, has shown some power, has shown some deficiencies in the field. Still a young guy, still a work in progress. We're hoping to see more from James Wood. But the question is, now that we are past the trade deadline, now that we are on the back half of the season, or the back nine, if you will, there's not a lot of baseball left to play, is what I'm trying to say here. is that this would be an excellent opportunity to get a look at some of these players that we've been told for the longest time are going to be the faces of the Nationals. You remember back of Harper, Soto, these big names that subsequently are no longer Nationals. These new players are going to be the faces of the franchise. I'm talking James Wood, Dylan Cruz, Brady House, those type of players. Color me skeptical. Seeing is believing. I do think that they're going to be good players, but I've been sold this bill of goods before. You take a look at some players that were called up or players that were signed to extensions that maybe haven't quite lived up to potential. And it makes you kind of scratch your head like, were the Nationals doing the right thing going all in on certain players? I guess Keibert Ruiz comes to mind as the Nationals inked him to a long-term deal and has shown some power here, I guess, at points, but all things considered has not been as advertised. So what I'm trying to say here is that I want to believe that Dylan Cruz is going to be a great player. I want to see that Brady House and these types of players, Robert Hassel, are going to be as advertised. And the questions abound for me primarily because I've been sold this bill of goods for some of the pitching. We have seen Josiah Gray. I know he's injured now, but hot and cold. What kind of player is he ultimately going to be? We don't know, as he will not be joining the Nationals for quite some time due to injury. You take a look at Mackenzie Gore. He's another one. Hot and cold. He has not been the second coming of Christ in the form of a pitcher. I had high hopes. I ultimately think that he will be a big piece on this team in years to come. But as of right now, some good games here, some other bad games there. We don't know. Cade Cavalli, another guy. So there are a lot of pieces out there that on paper are going to make the Nationals that much better. But I am not the guy that just puts all my chips in a basket and says, hey, listen, guys, hey, let's all come to Jesus here talking about the Nationals. They're not that good this year. But next year, that team is going to be loaded for bear. That is my hope. That is my prayer. But I want to see that exemplified out on the field. So what I'm getting at here is I want to see these players. But with that being said, I also want to tamper expectations. So it's kind of a polarizing thing. It's kind of vacillating back and forth. What is Dan talking about? What I'm talking about is I want to get a good look at these players on the big team and see what they have in the tank. I have a pretty good idea of what kind of player James Wood is going to be. I know that he is going to grow into that role, but I have a pretty good idea, a mental snapshot, if you will, of what kind of player that he's going to be. Dylan Cruz, he's marching up that ladder, marching up the ladder. There's one rung left, and it's on the Nationals. Why not now? Now, to the detractors, sometimes they say it's not a good idea to rush these players, as oftentimes if you push them ahead when they're not ready, that can stunt their growth. But I think we're at the point for the Nationals that they have kind of, struggled in a lot of ways since 2019. And I would like to see winning baseball brought back to the district. And that is going to be the biggest topic of this show is let's get a good look at some of these young prospects that we've heard about for quite some time. You talk about watching the national struggle. I know they picked up a win, but before this game, they had struggled with only 14 runs scored in their last 6 games. Again, that was before this game today, which resulted in 5 losses. It's understandable that fans and analysts are eagerly awaiting some positive changes. And I am. And it's going to be interesting to see when these players finally get the call up, that I think that the ceiling and the bar is going to be set so high that I think that to a certain extent, you can only kind of get let down. The Nationals have seen glimpses of hope from some of their young players, such as James Wood, C.J. Abrams, Luis Garcia, Keibert Ruiz, and Jacob Young. However, the rest of the lineup has been a mix of placeholders and long shot prospects, prompting many to turn their attention to highly anticipated prospects at Triple-A Rochester, particularly Dylan Cruz. and Brady House. I'm ready to set it for cruise control, aren't you? To see what this team looks like. Listen, if we want to talk about those players, James Wood, good. CJ Abrams, good. Still a little bit of a work in progress. Luis Garcia, a bounce back season. This is a guy that got sent down to the minors and has been a changed man all of this season. Keibert Ruiz, like I talked about, a bit of a mixed bag. You take a look at what the Nationals did at the draft, drafting some catchers there, that it makes you think that, hey, maybe they want to see what's behind door number 2 when it comes to catching Jacob Young. Jacob Young, for me, is a guy that has exceeded all of my expectations when he was called up last season. And kind of a placeholder or a stopgap measure was my assessment, as there were players that got injured. We remember the significant injury to Stone Garrett, those kind of players like that, you saw different players cycle through playing in the outfield. And I don't think there was high hopes for Jacob Young, but he definitely made the center field position his own. Is he going to be able to hold on to that and parlay that into a bigger role for the Nationals? That is the question. But the marquee player that I think most Nationals fans are looking for, kind of in the same breath as James Wood, is Dylan Cruz. And you talk about it, there is a buzz. It's palpable among the people that know the sport the best, that this team is going to be exponentially better when it's Dylan Cruz and James Wood in this young batch. Because if you take a look at it, the MLB pipeline and the prospect pool for the Nationals is markedly better than it has been, say a handful of years ago or 3 or 4 years ago. That there is a lot of young talent. And it's interesting. Oftentimes you see these players called up and oftentimes they don't pop off the page. But the players that have got called up this year, for the most part, have really killed it. I guess you could put Lipscomb as maybe not so much, but if I'm going to paint it with a broad brush, I've been excited. But let's get to the meat and potatoes. Dylan Cruz, the second overall pick in last summer's draft, has been a standout prospect despite solid but not outstanding performances. His recent impressive display at Rochester has caught the eye of many, with a .264 batting average, a .338 on base percentage, 13 homers, 66 RBIs, and 23 stolen bases in a total of 97 games at Rochester and Double-A Harrisburg. What is not to love? I think it's going in the right direction. Could those stats even be a bit better? Of course, but he has definitely been showing signs of growing by leaps and bounds. Dylan Cruz is definitely making a case for a call-up to the big leagues. Hey, coach, put me in. I'm ready. What are we waiting for? Is it the perception that, hey, this is a lost season? Let's not risk any sort of injury. Let's just kind of be all in on next year. Next year, we are going to be launching all the missiles, all the young missiles, to see what this team has in the tank. Is that really what's behind all of this? I guess it remains to be seen. At only 22 years old and with 592 plate appearances as a pro, Cruz is still considered relatively inexperienced. However, his exceptional track record in college baseball has put him in serious contention for a spot in the Nationals lineup, potentially sooner than later. All the insiders, all the beat writers are saying that it could happen this weekend. Could that be the case as a Nationals fan? How excited are you? So let's next talk about Brady House, the guy that a lot of people have circled as the future third baseman for the Nationals, a position that has been kind of a turnstile. Pretty much since Rendon, Zimmerman, if you want to go, quite a bit further back than that, that we've seen people plugged and played in there with high hopes of doing greater things. The Carter Kieboom experiment that I spoke of on this podcast and previous Nationals podcasts, it's never lived up to the hype. And I remember that was quite a bit of hype there as well. Talking about him, Carter Kieboom, he's going to be the guy at third base. Is Brady House going to be that guy? I want to believe it, but seeing is believing. Brady House, on the other hand, although younger than Cruz, has shown promise, especially during his time at Triple-A Rochester with a 270 batting average and a 461 slugging percentage. House has demonstrated his potential. However, his 33 to 4 strikeout to walk ratio and limited experience at Rochester suggests that he might need more time to fully develop before making the leap to the majors. So, and I don't think that that's, saying anything crazy. I think that it's kind of going along just the way a lot of people thought. I think most people thought that it was going to be James Wood and Dylan Cruz, and that Brady House was maybe perhaps a little ways out. I think that the fear there, like I spoke about with Dylan Cruz as well, is maybe pushing them forward too quickly. Could that almost stymie their growth? Promotion speculation as the Nationals weigh their options. There's strategic timing of promoting these prospects remains uncertain, while there is speculation about Cruz potentially getting the call-up during the recent homestand against the Rockies. The anticipation now shifts to the upcoming series against the Yankees and the Cubs. Wouldn't that be something? And talking about jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, that is what it would be. Talking about future expectations, whether we see the debut of Cruz or House in the next week, the next month, or even the next year, the excitement and expectations surround these two promising prospects continues to grow. All eyes are on the Nats' last 4 first-round picks, eagerly awaiting their arrival in the nation's capital. That is what I'm talking about. The anticipation that surrounds those players joining the team at some point. What are your thoughts? Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218. And do you believe that that is going to be a market change? And how much better are the Nationals going to be with, let's not get crazy. Let's not go, set this for a total, explosion here. But let's talk about James Wood and James Cruz. How good are the Nationals going to be with just those two players? Now, you take a look at it, Wood, you take a look at Cruz, they can't do everything because, well, that's only 2 positions. I think that, you need a whole lot more. There is still a lot of questions surrounding pitching. So it seems like they have the hitting on lock, the outfield on lock for the next season and, well, the distant future here as well. But the pitching is another area of concern. The Nationals have grown by leaps and bounds. The prospect pool is good. But there is still a lot of gaps that I think need to be filled. And maybe a lot of those gaps won't be filled until the off season. But my hope is at least before the start of next season. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the bullpen. Listen, when we heard about a lot of the big players that kind of got the heave-ho from the Nationals, there was a lot of questions about what is the bullpen going to look like? The Nationals have truly given up, but that hasn't been the case. I'll discuss straight ahead. Today's episode of the Talk Nats podcast is brought to you by our friends at MANSCAPED. And do me a favor here by supporting the podcast. Listen, MANSCAPED has been with me with the show for a long period of time. And do the right thing by supporting them with male grooming. And it's one of the things that oftentimes guys don't want to talk about, grooming below the waist. But Manscaped makes it easier with the Lawn Mower 5.0 Ultra, and the new color White Hot from Manscaped is the perfect summer grooming companion. It features next-gen dual skin-safe blade heads, an updated trimmer blades, and interchangeable foil blades for precise grooming. The trimmer blade has longer, wider, and rounded teeth for easy hair cutting, while the foil blade gives a smooth finish. This special edition trimmer in white is only available in limited quantity, so act fast if you're interested. It's like having 2 trimmers in one, and is equipped with an upgraded LED light and dual temperature function. Plus, it retains features like rechargeable lithium-ion battery, RPM technology, a travel lock, USB-C charging, and a waterproof design for grooming on the go. So listen, guys, take your grooming to the next level with Manscaped and do what over 10 million men worldwide have done by trusting Manscaped for all their grooming needs, and get the special edition Lawn Mower 5.0 Ultra in White Hot while supplies last. Just do it easy. Head over to manscaped.com and grab yours now when you use my special promo code NATS20. You'll get 20% off plus free international shipping at checkout. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the promo code NATS20 at manscaped.com. Make this summer the smoothest. All right, welcome back into this video edition. Of course, always available on audio. Let me know your thoughts out there on Twitter. Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218. Do you like the video component of the show, or are you satisfied with just the audio portion? I'm willing to accommodate the listeners and viewers where they are. Talking about the adversity faced in the bullpen trades. There was the perception that the Nationals were sellers, that they were out of it, that they were waving the white flag. Based on where they were in the standings, based on that we knew these were stopgap measures. I don't think there was ever any grand plans of having Jesse Winker on this team for the long term. But that was the thing. And you take a look at the bullpen as well. There was the perception that the Nationals are waving the white flag and the bullpen is going to suck now. The Nats faced adversity when they traded key pitchers like Hunter Harvey and Dylan Floro. Despite the losses, the remaining bullpen players have excelled, boasting a 1.95 ERA over the last 2 weeks. The best in the majors, manager Davey Martinez has had to reshuffle roles due to injuries, relying on inexperienced arms for crucial situations. So, and it's, one of the things that I love about this, what we've called in previous years, Scrappy Nats team, that, even when the perception is that this team is laying over and playing dead, they're eager to impress. They play for pride for the Nationals jersey. They play for pride for the Washington Nationals, and they play for future roles in Major League Baseball. But all things considered, the bullpen has been rather well. Standout performers in the bullpen, with only Kyle Finnegan and Robert Garcia remaining from the original setup. Jacob Barnes has emerged as a trusted reliever, excelling in high leverage situations. Additionally, Eduardo Salazar, claimed off waivers, has been a standout performer, contributing a 1.76 ERA in 11 games. Furthermore, the addition of Jose A. Ferrer and Joe Lasorsa has provided the Nats with 3 lefties in their bullpen for the first time this season, allowing Martinez to utilize matchups more effectively. So again, when you take a look at it, it is about making the most of your opportunities. You take a look at Eduardo Salazar, another guy that was looking to make a role on his team, Jacob Barnes. It's not just the Kyle Finnegan show. Some people, are asking if it was the right idea to hang on to Kyle Finnegan. What kind of return could they have got, considering what relievers were getting at the trade deadline? Talking about Tanner Rainey, Tanner Rainey has also shown progress after returning from Tommy John, with a notable improvement in his performance after his last 15 appearances. Despite a decline in velocity, Rainey has displayed better control and effectiveness on the mound. So, Nationals fans, there is still a lot to be excited about. Still the assessment phase. I understand that you take a look at Nats Park, how many people are at the game is way down, as people aren't, they know where the Nats are at this point. They know that to a certain extent that this is an assessment season. And I think, myself, like a lot of other Nationals fans, we're waiting for next season, as next season is going to be the year that the Nationals are going to be a lot better. And that's the only thing I can tell you in parting here, is to be patient, and hopefully maybe we can get a look at Dylan Cruz in the not too distant future. Wouldn't that be something to see what he has in the tank? Again, it's very important, I think, to tamper expectations. We've seen how he has played climbing up that ladder, but Major League Baseball is a totally different animal. That I think that is it. You need to be patient and understand that oftentimes these things don't go off without a hitch, but I still think it would be a good thing to see what kind of player he is in these games that don't have a whole lot of significance. There is no dreams of grandeur, I think, for the Nationals or the fans of making it to the playoffs or obviously winning a World Series. But let's get a look. Let's see who should be on this team, who should maybe be on the move, because as we know, the Nationals pushed all their chips on this coaching staff. Was that the right thing? You take a look at it. If the Nationals just took a big nosedive for the rest of the season, hey, you guys, you're all in on this coaching staff. A questionable move, kind of questionable ideas by Rizzo and Martinez and the whole thing. I think that if the Nationals they don't play that well next year, I think that it will be kind of a fire sale. You'll see Martinez out of here. You'll see pretty much the entire coaching staff looking for new jobs, maybe even Rizzo. As I think to a certain extent, you can preach patience for only so long, but at the end of the day, patience will run short if this Nationals team is not a lot better next season. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, part of the Belief Podcast Network. Once again, hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 and let me know, do you like the video component of this show, or are you just content with audio? Would you like both? I would like to hear from you. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Talk Nats podcast, and I'll talk to you again next time.